When we're doing Unit 2 for BTEC National Business, we know we need to produce two files, don't we? One for Activity 1, one for Activity 2. And as part of Activity 1, the assessment focus number 4, worth 10 marks, is the justification. And this is where we apply two models to your proposed marketing mix, the chosen option, aims and objectives, and the marketing campaign. Well, recent BTEC examiner reports have highlighted how an increasing number of learners are using the product lifecycle as one of their chosen models, often using it to replace Pestle. So in this video, we're going to take a quick look at the product lifecycle, a reminder of what it is, how to find some research information that might help you apply the model, and then we'll work through a little example of how I applied it to one of our recent practice case studies. So the key thing to remember with the product lifecycle is that in our research pack and in part B, we're looking for evidence. What's the evidence of market growth in particular? And is market growth provided, or is there some evidence that there might be some slower growing segments or perhaps some faster growing segments? We then apply that research data using the product lifecycle model, and then we try to justify and apply that to our chosen option, the aims and objectives that we set, and our marketing campaign. Let's start though by just doing a quick bit of revision on the product lifecycle. It's quite an easy model, a simple model to remember. It just tries to predict the typical phases that products go through as they are firstly introduced, and then as they grow, as the market becomes better established, more mature, and then finally as a market starts to decline. And often this is illustrated, as we're seeing on the screen here, by a graph that shows the different phases. So the development phase is new product development, and then a product is launched into the market. It's the introduction phase. And sales may be relatively slow to start to grow, but sooner or later, a successful product in a market will grow fast. That's the red line there, accelerating in terms of sales over time. Then it reaches a phase where the growth in the market is relatively low, but still growing or standing still. And then, well, the bad news for markets that enter the decline phase is that sales start to fall. However, there's an argument that through things like product extension strategies, for example, changing the price or changing the packaging or finding some new users, it's possible to sustain the maturity phase before markets start to decline. That's the basic idea, but how do we apply that to our research pack and part B in the information about the Unit 2 case study? Well, here's a bit of a guide for the kind of things that you might look out for. First of all, we're looking for data, anything in the information or perhaps the primary research that tells us about the growth rate of the business. Is there any indication from what's also written that this is an introductory product, very much at the early stages? The evidence there might be that there are very few people using the product, maybe what we call early adopters, maybe very limited distribution of the product. And the challenge here is just to find people to give the product a go. More likely, the product might be in the growth phase. So here we're looking at market growth rates, typically 10% or more per year. Lots of evidence of new entrants entering the market, perhaps using new product development. Evidence of distribution becoming wider rather than just being limited. Perhaps some evidence of brands starting to emerge and products being differentiated in order to gain market share. That's the kind of thing we're looking for growth phase. What about the maturity phase? Well, this, don't forget, is where the market is growing slowly, sometimes very slowly, maybe 1% per year, maybe a little bit more than that. But in other words, the mature market is really well established. We tend to find that certain brands, certain products, certain businesses have large market shares, and those market shares are well established. Another feature you might see is intense competition, perhaps lots of use of sales promotion to try to grab sales, grab the demand in the market. We also tend to see distribution channels which are well established start to evolve, perhaps by manufacturers or brands selling direct to consumers and trying to avoid other distribution channels, retail channels, for example. And lastly, is there any evidence in the case study that you see of a market in decline, where there's very little product innovation, where the sales growth of the market is negative, where maybe there are some brands that are leaving the market. That's evidence of decline. Hopefully, you'll be able to spot that evidence from part A and part B from the research pack and what we're told in part B in the exam. But then how do you apply that model in order to grab some marks, grab some of those 10 marks going for assessment focus 4? Well, how you do it is for assessment focus 4 is that you need to use 2 models. So don't write about 3. So if you are going to use product life cycle and substitute perhaps PESTLE, don't write about PESTLE, SWOT, and product life cycle because you're wasting your time. And time is really precious in Unit 2. We apply these models by trying to explain how they help justify what we are going to use for our aims and objectives and our suggested marketing mix and marketing campaign. So we're looking to apply and draw out the information from the research pack, but then talk about and write about why that matters to the case study business. Well, that sounds really easy, and it's not that easy, but why don't we just give you a quick example of that in action? And here I'm going to use Charming Chocolate, which was our new practice paper for 2023 that we introduced a few days ago, just to give you some more practice at getting ready for Unit 2. Well, I think with the product life cycle, it's relatively easy and quick to apply it effectively. Certainly a lot quicker than writing out details of the PESTLE model. And what I would do is I would split it into 2 parts. First of all, I would try to identify and summarize some of the key research evidence on the product lifecycle stage. And then I would try to apply that and justify what that means for the case study business. So first up here on the screen, I've just drawn out, and it's really just 3 or 4, 5 sentences. I've tried to pick out what I discovered from part A, the research pack, and from part B that helps me assess where chocolate bars are in their product life cycle. Let's read through, see what we think. So the evidence from the research indicates that the overall chocolate bar market in the UK is in the maturity phase. So I'm applying the model. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, it's growing steadily, but slowly. For example, we were told that the chocolate bar market overall is growing at 1.5% per year, and we're told that demand is stable. So pretty steady, but slow growth. We're also told that the market is dominated by a small number of well-known multinational businesses and brands, such as Nestle and Cadbury's and Lindt. More evidence for the maturity phase is that the product is widely distributed and no surprise because everybody wants to buy chocolate. And of course, well-established market shares amongst those big brands. And of course, that should come as no surprise to Charming Chocolate because they've been in this traditional market for over 100 years. So they know it's a mature market. However, there is also some evidence in the research pack that there might be some segments of the chocolate bar market which are actually in a growth phase. So, for example, sales of plant-based chocolate in the UK, we're told, increased by around about 20 to 25% per year over the last 3 or 4 years there, between 2018 and 2021. We're also given some evidence or some information about some new brands, such as HIP Chocolate and Nomo and 1 or 2 others that have managed to enter the chocolate bar market by using innovative product development, in particular around plant-based formulations. So there is some evidence that there are some growth segments in a market that overall is growing slowly, therefore in the maturity phase. So that's the first part of applying product lifecycle, isn't it? We've applied what we found out in the research pack to this case study. The next part, though, is just to write a sentence or 2 about how that justifies our marketing mix. So it's all about justification. So here we go. I've had a go. So a consequence of what we've written before for Charming Chocolate is that a mature, low-growth market will make it hard for them to achieve their aim of growing sales. The market shares of the likes of Nestle, Cadbury and Mars are likely to remain high and stable. Of course they will, because they're big businesses that spend a lot of money on marketing and distribution. So Charming will struggle to increase market share just by selling more of its traditional large chocolate bars. So in that traditional chocolate bar market, Charming will need to ensure its prices remain competitive against other brands, and we know that Charming operates in the mid-range segment. So we've applied that to say, you need to make sure that for your existing products, you keep your prices competitive. However, what about those growth segments? Well, this is where we think the opportunity is, isn't it? So, however, the smaller segments that are clearly in the growth phase of the product lifecycle provide much better opportunities for Charming to achieve the aim of increasing sales. For example, the primary research indicates that around about 1 in 4 adults would be prepared to buy and try new products, particularly plant-based products. So this justifies our marketing campaign based around product development and building brand awareness. And I think that's enough. I think we've explained what the evidence is for the product lifecycle. We've applied it to the case study business, and we've then talked about the implications of the maturity phase and the growth phase segments for Charming's marketing mix. I reckon those 2 pages or those 2 paragraphs taken together, that's enough to apply the product life cycle effectively. I'd also do a SWOT analysis based around what I read in part B and in the research pack. That for me will be enough to grab as many of those 10 marks as possible for AF4 before taking a break for a minute and then moving on to doing a really good marketing mix in activity 2. But anyway, hopefully that's useful. That's just my take on how to use the product lifecycle in AF4.